Good morning, Internet. Yashoda here with West Coast Yoga. Today we're introducing a series called Gurus Gone Wild. The purpose of this series is to give examples from history of the great risk and disappointment that comes when a conditioned soul is voted into the position of guru. Today's episode features one of my favorite former swamis named Narahari Swami. Many ISKCON devotees haven't heard of Narahari Swami, and that probably is because he has been living on the island of Oahu in Hawaii for the past 25 years. Because Hawaii is in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, the Hawaii community doesn't see a lot of interference from mainstream ISKCON, and as a result, Hawaii is home to many Hare Krishna offshoots and splinter groups. For example, we have one of the largest and most active homosexual Hare Krishna communities under the leadership of a group called GALVA, the Gay and Lesbian Vaishnav Association. Today's story begins in the mid-1980s. As many of my readers know, the ISKCON Society, known formally as the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, originally only had a single guru figure as its authority and managing director. That guru was the movement's founder, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. However, in 1977, a power struggle emerged in the young ISKCON society, and after Swami Prabhupada passed away, some of his leading students began engaging in a power struggle to replace him. This power struggle was later called the Guru Wars. Now, this is actually quite common within many institutions. When the founder passes on, who becomes the successor? 11 prominent disciples of Swami Prabhupada became known collectively as the Zonal Acharyas, were able to exert their influence through bribery, threats, and occasionally violence. It is for this reason that the 1980s are commonly referred to as the Zonal Acharya era. As early as 1981, however, these so-called gurus began to deviate with strange and criminal behavior. At least 6 of them began having sexual relationships with their disciples, and in 2 of the instances, homosexual relationships. Jayatirtha, who was one of the more outlandish gurus, was caught smuggling illegal drugs into the United Kingdom. At the same time, Kirtanananda was arrested for racketeering, and Hansaduta opened fire on a car dealership with a semi-automatic rifle. Clearly, the 11 gurus were caught up in some kind of criminal enterprise, and by the end of the 1980s, ISKCON's management structure, known as the governing body, or GBC, was more or less in shambles in North America. Thus, the North American governing body needed to take drastic measures to prompt additional members of regular ISKCON into the status of swamis, gurus, and GBC leaders. In this way, the Neo-ISKCON movement began. Neo-ISKCON is a term often used to describe the period when a brand new wave of gurus came into power. We can logically infer that ISKCON's second wave of gurus were basically yes men to the original 11 Zonal Acharyas. By swearing fidelity to the 11 Acharyas, these Neo-ISKCON gurus were able to inherit positions of immense power and influence within the society. Some examples of Neo-gurus are Radhanath Swami, who was a yes man to Kirtanananda, Gopal Krishna, who was a yes man to Jayapataka, Dhanavir Swami, who was a yes man to Bhagavan, and Jayadvaita Swami, who was a yes man to Satsvarup. The new wave of ISKCON gurus did not profess that Srila Prabhupada had appointed them. Instead, they claimed that the GBC had the authority to appoint new gurus. And beginning in 1982, this guru appointment idea has been in force within ISKCON. Most rank and file members of ISKCON believe that the GBC has the authority to appoint gurus, although Srila Prabhupada never gave them that authority. And so the leaders of the society are going down a very risky path of electing gurus among regular rank and file members who seriously lack the credentials and in many cases are actually criminal agents. Many of the swamis who are active in ISKCON management today were awarded the title of sannyas in the 1980s, and these persons need to be held accountable and scrutinized for their role in driving the scandals facing ISKCON over the last 40 years. More specifically, in 1977, Srila Prabhupada issued a letter to the GBC stating that he didn't want any more appointment of swamis in ISKCON. In the letter, Prabhupada told the GBC that he personally had multiple bad experiences with disciples being disingenuous regarding sannyas. It's amazing that in spite of this letter forbidding sannyas, so many new sannyasis were created in the 1980s. We're talking about dozens and dozens. These men have willfully disobeyed Srila Prabhupada's clear instructions, and the result is the collapse of ISKCON preaching in North America. Narahari is one such example. He was a yes man to Rameshwar in Honolulu in the 1980s. There are multiple articles in the Hare Krishna magazine called Back to Godhead, or BTG, depicting Narahari as a dynamic preacher and fearless leader. However, by closer examination, Narahari was a debauched man, and he engaged in many questionable behaviors. Devotees who were around in the 80s describe Honolulu as a wild temple. Homosexual Hare Krishnas began arriving on the island in large numbers because Narahari encouraged a sexually relaxed environment. In fact, although wearing the robes of a celibate monk, Narahari was often engaged in sexual behavior with men, and he was caught receiving oral sex from one of the male priests in the community. Eventually, Narahari gave up his saffron robes out of embarrassment, but before doing so, he succeeded in selling off Srila Prabhupada's farm on the island called Big Island, which is a neighboring island to Oahu. He also sold a very valuable boat valued at over $200,000, which had been donated for free to the temple, and he kept the proceeds for himself. In addition, devotees in Hawaii describe an environment of drug sales and violence under his leadership. Fast forward to today. In modern ISKCON, Narahari still shows up to the temple, although his wife has recently become disgusted with his lies, and she divorced him, preferring to move to Florida. To help pay for the divorce fees, Narahari regularly performs homosexual weddings, and he does this in the name of spiritual advancement. It's amazing how old tendencies come back to haunt us. Not only that, but Narahari recently sold the Hare Krishna Preaching Center in Waimanalo for multiple millions of dollars. And Narahari continues to initiate disciples despite his own philosophical deviations from ISKCON's strict standards. I hope this video has been informative to my audience. If you have any further questions about Narahari, don't hesitate to contact me by email at jessethemonk@gmail.com. Thank you.